Hello and welcome to this Fire Safety Insights podcast. I'm Charles Devenish, the Managing Director of Dexon Fire and Smoke Curtains. We're redefining fire curtains, seeking to improve performance in real life beyond the laboratory, and we're looking to put the UK firmly on the map as a global leader for this product. Today I'm joined by Tim Carey. Can you introduce yourself, Tim?
Hiya.
With you.
Yes, I'm Tim Carey. I am Design and C2P Director for Macy's Construct Engine. And just for a bit of background, C2P is a terminology that we use, which stands for Construction to Production, and it's effectively the use of MMC and digital technologies to drive productivity improvements.
Very good. And the title of our podcast today is the question product standards or product design or both. So we're going to look into that in a bit more detail. Just to give some context why Tim's here today, tell us a bit about your working history, Tim, and about your product background with Wilmots.
Yeah, so I started off, I suppose I wanted to be an architect, probably played a bit too much football, didn't do enough studying, so I didn't get the grades. And then I kind of drifted into doing a new course, Design and Construction Management. So the idea of being a design manager, this was 94, was quite a new thing on the block.
Excellent.
Did that, and then slowly found my way through a variety of design roles, pre-construction roles. I spent 14 years at Wilmot Dixon as their Chief Product Director, leading on quality, innovation, MMC, design. And now I joined Mace in March of last year in the role that I now currently do.
Very good, very good. So a lot of history around products and design, and we have the old saying that you many on the audience would have heard is well planned is half done. So I suppose you're a firm believer in that, aren't you?
Exactly. Measure twice, cut once.
Exactly. Yes. I've used that today already. That expression.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what I personally pushed for is to treat buildings as we would do a manufacturing process. So to make sure that the systems, the products, the manufacturers that we use are defined really upfront, and we're much more strategic in the way that we do that, as opposed to historically, where as an industry we've just, job by job, we go out and procure, and then often we don't really compare apples with apples when we're doing a product appraisal. But if we can design around standard systems and tried and tested products, we drive down our cost of error and we can ultimately produce a better product.
Yeah, very good. So you are Mace doing a lot more off-site, or how do you see that?
Yeah, we've got three real key drivers for our business, or enablers for our business. Net zero carbon, low carbon buildings. Yeah. Digital integration is a big one to drive productivity. Yeah. And then, as I said, what we call construction to production. So really, how do we move as much of the work away from the on-site coalface as possible, to drive quality, to drive sustainability, to make sure that we're growing skill bases around the country, because a lot of what we do is in the M25 or central London. Yeah. But there's obviously a wider labour market, both there, and also we do work overseas as well.
Of course, yeah. No, we've seen Mace. You've got an American.
We have, yeah.
American and South American now, is that?
Yeah, so I lose count, but Philippines, Middle East, South America. We just won a multi-billion-pound project to project manage a new tunnel under the Hudson River.
Oh wow!
In New York, so yeah. I'm waiting for the invite to go out and see that one. But yeah, we've got lots on.
Very good. And what do you see as a it feeds in quite nicely to the subject we're talking today around products, but what do you see the current restraints or inhibitors on the offsite? What's holding it back from scaling up?
I think
or are there none?
No, I think there are definitely, and I think unfortunately it's difficult for individual manufacturers to address it. So you see this continual cycle of investment and commitment towards MMC, and then it drops off a cliff because it just can't bridge that adoption chasm. And government will try and inject some monies, but ultimately, unless you've got a real program of repeatable works that lend itself to MMC, it's very difficult to break that cycle. So we've seen some pretty high profile casualties in the last couple of months.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, your legal and generals, your Elkis of this world.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems is that because they sold three-dimensional MMC solutions and volumetric solutions, it's very difficult to pivot to something else if you've got a factory that's committed to making one product. Okay. It's like if I've got a car factory and all of a sudden the public decide they want vans, I can't pivot. Whereas if you in Mace, what we tend to do is we've got a manufacturer agnostic solution. So we're not, we don't own a concrete factory. So the answer's not always concrete.
Yeah.
You know, the answer is, well, what's right for the project? And so really it's about, well, how can we have multiple manufacturers and multiple systems across all of the categories of MMC, and then have good metrics that enable us to deploy those at scale on the right jobs. So we're always trying to find the right optimal solution for the characteristics of that project.
So it's almost like the best of both angles is what you're trying to
exactly.
from, rather than being sort of stuck in a production line type sort of mentality, or in a factory where you're saying that it's not so easy to pivot and what have you.
It's like an integrated model. So you're not carrying personally the fixed overheads of the factory, but what you are trying to do is work more closely with fewer partners but more meaningful relationships for longer, to try and help aggregate demand and build their businesses as well. So
and is that coming together off-site physically more so, or is it still a lot of it coming together on-site?
We've looked at both now and in the past life. I've looked at flying factories around, like near site they call it, but fundamentally it's components that are manufactured in a factory, kind of like the biggest, smallest bit, if that makes sense. So if it's an assembly of products, whether it's a modular plant room or a piece of M&E kit or a facade panel, and then brought to site, but then rapidly installed. So there's a good example. We've got a job chapter London Bridge, which is flying up at a rate of knots. It's got part of what we call a high-rise solution, which is a structural solution, and then off-site manufactured cladding panels. And you can really see the benefits as it goes up.
There seems to be, from a, you might say, theoretical perspective, is off-site makes so much sense. From a health and safety perspective, speed on site. From a client perspective, they've invested in a site and they can potentially get to where they want a lot quicker. How do the costs compare, do you think, with in real life? How do the off-site costs are they?
Well, I think you can. That's always a $64,000 question. I think you have to take I'm not ducking it. I'll come back to it in a minute, but you have to take a holistic view. And I think, going back to your exam question a minute ago, one of the problems with off-site is that we don't capture the empirical data that tells us from a holistic perspective what the benefits are. So with my past employer, we commissioned a piece of research with Cambridge, University of Cambridge, to actually look at, well, what are the benefits of off-site? How do you quantify them? Did loads of interviews, and the actual conclusion come back that said it's really difficult to quantify them because nobody measures it in the same way. But if you're going to do it, here's how you could do it. And then take it that way. I think if you deploy off-site manufacturing in the right scenario, so you use the right solution for the right product, you can get it cost neutral. And then there are secondary benefits in terms of time, cost and quality. It's not always, those benefits have got to be mapped onto the client. So for example, if you're doing private sale, being able to smash through a load of units and hand them all over will probably not be that beneficial, because the sales rate will only be a certain amount a week.
Of course.
Whereas if you're doing something different, like affordable rent or private rental market, the client will probably take as many as they can get at the same point in time. So the same characteristic, but the benefit curve is different depending on the market in question.
Of course. Just from a very, very high level, I've sort of looked at some costings, and I was actually surprised at how costly it was off-site, and I couldn't really understand it. What do you put that down to? Because you think if you can do something 100 times, you're going to get economies of scale and efficiencies. All the benefits that probably MMC appeals to people for, as well as obviously carbon benefits and speed.
I think the question is, we don't do it 100 times. That's the problem. How much did the first iPad cost?
Exactly.
20 million quid probably, but exactly, no one would ever buy one at that rate. But, and that's why I think the missing link really for me is government programs that push through a demand for buildings at a scale where a repeatable product starts to make commercial sense.
Interesting. And are there any concerns of, again, very much from a high level, but I've heard of, is there any concern around the compartmentation between sort of modules, for example, when they're actually constructed, and fire risks and what have you, or is that?
I think it all comes down to good design. If you, fundamentally the chassis is just a slightly different chassis, but the detail or the care that's required to detail it correctly, with your fire stopping and your compartmentation and your barriers, and actually dealing with things as a system as opposed to an individual product.
Yeah.
The requirements are the same. You've just got, do the hard work once, benefit lots of times.
Exactly.
As opposed to, we love to build a prototype and then build another prototype.
Yeah. It comes back down to probably what we were just talking before, was about from a client perspective, is people do like, back to your design background as well, is you could get the repeatability, but then how do you get the distinctiveness and the architectural side of it, to suit a client, for example. It might work at one end of the market, but as you go higher end, will it still work, you think? Or?
Yeah, I always think that if you do your job right, I'll call it as a product designer.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to tell that it's a standard product.
Okay.
So a Mini.
Yeah.
There's something like 2 million variants of a Mini.
Oh wow. Okay.
Whether it's the bodywork or the specification, but you can't. You still feel like it's your own.
It's your own car. Yeah. The car manufacturers have sort of cottoning onto that, I think, more and more, aren't they? You go on the website and you build your own, basically, and you sort of feel like it's your own one. No, that's very interesting. So, thanks for the background there, Tim. And just moving into the subject what we're going to be getting onto today, Building Safety Act, fire safety.
Yeah.
I believe you're right up to the minute on that.
Yeah. It's taken a lot of time up. So
tell us how that's panning out for Mace and how you see that affecting the industry and from a product to construction perspective.
Well, I think most importantly we welcome it. Ultimately, if you look at all the things that have come out in response to the Hackett review, they're only reinforcing the things that we should have been doing anyway as an industry.
Fully agree. Yeah.
Making sure that we are specifying the right products and systems in the right place.
Yeah.
Making sure that we've got the right product information. Making sure that we've got the right information to be able to give to the end user and the accountable person. All of that is making sure that we're not breaking systems as well, because we think that there's a commercial advantage.
Yes, yeah, very good.
All of these things should have been being done anyway. So we welcome it. It is a challenging landscape, trying to navigate our way through exactly what the new legislation means and what the requirements are.
Yeah.
So what we've done is we've effectively set up a series of teams within this to control and command our response to it.
Very good.
So we've got a gold team, which is effectively our really executive leadership, and the aim is that they can, through the links with things like the CLC, can interface with government, try and understand policies as they come out, try and influence and be the voice of the industry as well as policies are being shaped.
Very good.
At a more granular level, we then have a whole series of what we call bronze working groups, which are focused on, well, what do we need to do with our supply chain? How do we assess our own competency and those of others? What do we need to do to our digital systems to make sure we capture the golden thread? Or we've got forms in place for mandatory accounts reporting and the like. And what do we need to do in terms of our operational implementation to not only upskill our people, but to make sure that we change and update our systems and processes to just reinforce the fact that we're doing the right thing time and time again.
Very good. Do you think it's much of a culture shock generally, and do you think it's more or less of a culture shock for Mace? Do you think you're already sort of seeking to do those things? And
I'd like to think we're always trying to do the right thing. Yeah. It's an evolution more than a revolution. And it's formalising some of it, but it can be quite, for those of us that are not involved every single day in this. So we've got 7,500 people in Mace. So trying to distill what is a lot of messaging and very valid messaging into the real crystal actions and call to action takeaways that people need to do for their role on their level, on their projects, is something that we're trying to just extract out the really key messaging to make sure that people do the right things.
Yeah, interesting. So your bronze team, are they like the implementation team?
Yeah, fundamentally. Yeah, exactly.
I'm personally a big fan of the changes that are being driven, and I think we need to look at criticism as constructive, don't we? And we're all, at the end of the day, we want to reduce risk, we want to mitigate risk, we want buildings to be safer, built better, etc. There is a bit of you sometimes see some sort of negativity or pushback on some of the proposals and criticisms. But I think as an industry we mustn't resist change. We need to embrace it, don't we? And it's better for all of us, isn't it? I suppose also.
Yeah, I was going to say I would absolutely agree with that, and that's and in fact one of the things that we've spoken about within Mace is you know, I haven't got a magic, you know, I haven't got a magic wand or a crystal ball, but I could, if I did, I could absolutely guarantee you that at some point in time, all of the extra provisions that are currently only required on HRBs will come into force on all buildings.
Yeah.
So we might as well get ourselves together, make sure that we're doing the right things, and then, you know, I actually think that will give businesses competitive advantage, because those that are, you know, progressive, forward-thinking, want to do the right things will actually benefit, as well as the most important thing is that we keep people safe in the buildings.
Yeah, no, it's very good. That's what we need to keep before us, that we're doing this to keep people safe, aren't we, or to improve the safeness, you might say, of the built environment. But yeah, from a commercial aspect, instead of us resisting, we need to see the opportunity and change, don't we? And as you say, be forward-thinking, be progressive, because if we're at the front of the curve, then, you know, we're going to reap the rewards of that. And it's not to sort of over commercialise it, but it's to have a positive mindset about the whole thing, isn't it? Because ultimately it's going to make buildings safer, isn't it?
Exactly, and we need, you know, moving towards more value-based judgments rather than just cost-based judgments.
Brilliant.
The amount of times that I've seen that, you know, as an industry, we do value engineering without really understanding the consequences of that, and there's no value in it.
No,
it's product substitution. Isn't it?
I was going to say,
it's swapping one product out for a more inferior one because that product's cheaper.
Hoping it's going to do the same job in the system, in the building that it's being put into.
Yeah,
that can sometimes actually devalue actually the work of the designer, say the architects, whatever, who have actually probably carefully considered how different systems, or they've got years and years of experience putting things together. It's a real balancing act, really, isn't it? And I think the is it Gateway 3? Is it that's going to it's not prohibit but restrict that a lot more, the changes?
Well, you've got obviously you've got Gateway 1, which is effectively when you're planning Gateway 1 when you put your planning application in and get that approved.
Yeah.
You know, that makes, you know, the regulator a statutory consultee, and also fundamentally requires like the fire, you know, the fire strategy to be in place.
Okay. Yeah.
Then we've got Gateway 2, which is the building control application.
Yeah.
And then Gateway 3, which is the pre-occupation approval as well.
Okay.
So basically, we go back from Gateway 3. Gateway 3 is effectively proving that what you said you were going to do in Gateway 2, you've done.
You've done it.
So if you go back to Gateway 2, I think that's a massive change, because effectively, you know, what we understand is what the regulator will rightly be looking for is, what is the design? What is the specification for the building? Not just, well, here's a bit now, and we'll give you more in due course as we bring CDP packages on board. It's like, well, no, when we start off on the journey, we need to know the building works in totality. Is it safe? And, you know, the other thing is, building safety isn't just about fire.
No,
it's about all aspects.
Yes,
so it's very likely that certainly for HRBs that follow the Gateway to approval process, we're going to need a lot more design up front.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
You know, bearing in mind under the REBA planner works, there shouldn't be any design in REBA 5 anyway. It should all be done anyway.
Yeah, it's back to that well planned is half done, isn't it? And exactly. I am old enough, been in construction long enough to remember coming out the GFC. Yeah. And what we saw then was a I don't know, there's too much to say. It was a pretty horrendous race to the bottom. Contractors trying to pick up work. Yeah. Because obviously they're trying to keep the machine going, trying to keep the wheels turning, which is, you know, obviously sort of sympathetic of it, whatever. But we saw sort of 2010, 2011, 2012, I'm pretty sure from memory, we were seeing projects that the design was almost getting sacrificed up front. It was almost like figure it out a little bit. Yeah. And some really basic stuff, just, you know, reaching site and it's like, well, what's going in here? You know, not a lot of thought, because people were probably trying to cut budgets further up. But it's the wrong way, because it actually was costing people more. It was delaying programme. Yeah. People were doing, you know, if people factored in the cost of meetings, for example, and meetings, it's a huge expense, isn't it, on construction, just because it's the people in it.
100%, and you don't see it in any other industry.
No,
you wouldn't go to you wouldn't go to buy your car. And they go, well, we designed the wheels, but not the chassis. Exactly. But it'll be all right by the time you get it. Or when you're 20 miles down the road, then we'll finish designing the chassis. You know, so but we just think that that's acceptable.
Or the guys putting the seats in or decide what seats you're getting and seat belts.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, we just
depends what we've got in on the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very good. That's good. So it's all improvements, all for a better and safer future, essentially, isn't it? We're not going to get there overnight, are we? But we, what we need is we need the support. I think, you know, I'm a pro-government person per se. I don't say that from a party perspective, but I'm pro-government, you know, and I think we need to support authorities in trying to do the right thing. rather than trying to like discourage and undermine potentially. You know, it's not going to lead to a safer future, is it?
No, absolutely, and we need to support each other.
Exactly.
I mean, we're doing a lot of work through. We have a Mace Business School where we provide training and support to our key suppliers, and so trying to run dedicated sessions on Building Safety Act and the importance of product specification is really key. You know, we're not in a competition with anybody.
No.
Same with if we can share knowledge with other contractors or clients, we're all doing it. We're all doing it together.
That's very good. Yeah. So you're doing a Mace actually doing supply chain sort of almost awareness, education sort of program.
Yeah.
That's
so we've done a few things. We've internally in Mace we've looked at competency.
Yeah.
So we've developed up a model that says, well, for each year or role within Mace, what are the skills, knowledge, experience, and behaviours that we need to be able to develop for people to be competent.
Yeah.
Not just if you're a principal designer, but just for your general role. And and then now what we're doing is working. So we're supporting the Build UK on an update to the Common Assessment Standard, which will also look at competency for suppliers. But more importantly, we're getting our partners in the room and going, well, how can we help you? Have you thought about this?
Excellent.
What can we learn from you as well to build our competency?
Yeah, genuine collaboration. And will we see an increase in construction costs? Will the client have to pick up a slightly bigger bill, do you think, at some point? Or realisation that construction done properly does have a price to it, maybe?
I think construction done properly will always have a price compared to construction not done properly.
Exactly, yes. Yeah,
but whether or not, I think sometimes we ask, I'm not talking for Mace here, but I think we ask clients to pay for construction done properly.
We do, yes.
And then we give them construction not done properly.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't think there should be a specific uplift for doing the right thing.
No. Well, just on that and how do you see that pattern? So asking clients to pay for it done properly and then it not being done properly, how is that going to be removed?
That's a broad question, isn't it? But all I can do is speak for ourselves and say that, when we're putting
the regulator have a part to play in that? Do you think there's going to be any change there? You've got the OPSS now, and you've got obviously the BSR.
Well, I think there's going to be more scrutiny, isn't there? And also as well, I mean, going back to the education piece, part of that is also, supporting our clients on their journeys so that they're asking the right things, the right questions, and the right analysis when tender returns come in from contractors as well, to make sure that, we really are assessing things from the right perspective.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was only having a conversation probably last week or the week before talking about construction done properly, and it was actually to do with in the care construction sector, and clients. The person I'm speaking to was a very experienced construction person, been in it for years, been away from it for 3 or 4 years, and they were putting together a tender for a client, and the client potentially had a bit of a break as well, but we've obviously seen a lot of inflation over that period, but what historically happened is there was a lot of legacy issues with the previous construction, and they were paying, don't want to expose myself here, but say £3,000 a square metre, and they're now seeing a significant, actually a cost relative difference where they're going, we can't, the model doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And that was because the builder that was basically saying, well, we can't give you now with the current sort of situation where we are Building Safety Act and probably everyone's probably a little bit more careful about what can happen if you don't do things properly, is the same, we need to price this properly. We don't want the legacy issues that we previously had. So
yeah, that's a pretty damning indication of their previous practices, to be honest with you.
Very, very much so, yes, yeah. Well, we get called, from a product perspective, we get called out pretty much every week to, just in our little market, fire curtains, we get called out every week to fire curtains not working in real life, which will bring us onto the subject of the podcast, but where you've got products that have passed the laboratory test, set up perfectly, you've got a period of time to set up, you can get it all working correctly, but then people are under pressure on site and maybe cost pressures and the tolerances that there are, and in real life the product isn't passing a weekly fire test, for example. And we get called out to these, let's say, pretty much on a weekly basis. I wouldn't say daily, but it's every week we get called out to, fire curtains jamming, why aren't they dropping, why aren't they deploying, they're only 2 years old, this is the product. So it is, it's a real, and it's obviously quite a pain for a massive pain for clients, and they don't have the budget from an FM perspective for a capital, major maintenance intervention in year 2 or 3. So
right, okay, that's interesting. Yeah,
but it's
I mean, it is interesting. I think part of it is we've been doubling down on our inspection test plans and installation, and just understanding that how does that product work in that specific environment, in that specific location, in that specific substrate?
Yeah, very good.
You know, and you know, one of the things is we have to be really careful about test data that is in controlled environment, and you know, yes, we can rely upon it, but we can only rely on it in the context for which it's taken. You know, one of the things that we got asked, you know, the internal question within Mace is, well, should we have a library of test data? And there is an argument for that, but there's also a danger as well, because then if you're not careful, you're reliant upon fire test data for products, and then you've only got to have one parameter of how that product is deployed or utilised in a system or a build-up. And you could run the risk, if you weren't careful, of relying upon a test data that then is no longer valid. And then, you know, the last thing we want to do is to get into engineered judgments or
very good.
You know, anything else.
Yeah, we're big advocates of actually having, under the European standards and classification system, you have to have what's called an XAP, an extended application for a product. So a furnace will typically say 3x3 meters or 4x4. Just relating it back to the products that we sell is 50% of the market will be bigger than the furnace. So how do you assess that? Well, under the old BS 476 system, it's an assessment, it's just that. Whereas under the XAP, you've got to do, there's a whole series of tests and calculations that need to be applied, and it's very widely accepted that it's a much more rigorous and prudent and conservative assessment method. So that does, you know, coming back to your, you know, that can almost be a dangerous complacency, just relying on a piece of information, can't there, and then applying it just carte blanche.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just going to just talk about reliance on information too. Is you probably, I don't know whether you followed the Grenfell inquiry much, but Richard Millett in some of his overarching closing statements, I think, phase 2 module 7 off memory, November 2022, he was referring to one of the contributory factors of Grenfell being an over-reliance on guidance, including statutory guidance that was dangerously out of date. He said often was created by non-governmental bodies and influenced by commercial interests, but just fastening on the over-reliance bit and the outdated bit, it's back to your library. It's we can't take the skill and the competence of the individual out of this, can we?
No, absolutely. We need to reinforce it.
We can't just go to buildings built by a machine. I know, you know, I don't want to have an argument about or a debate about AI exactly, but we need the individuals with the skill, the competency, and the awareness to apply things correctly and to make sure they're up to date, don't we? Yeah,
you always need that overwatch as well. And we had a talk actually. Peter Apps, who did the book Show Me the Bodies. Show Me the Bodies, yeah. Actually came into the office just before Christmas. To give a talk to a good number of most people just on the background to the book and some of the key messages. And you know, when you hear some of the stories about misrepresented products or mislabeled products that were sold or inferred to be sold beyond beyond the scope for which they've been tested.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes,
You know, it's a real litany of errors that kind of have led to the tragedy that occurred.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we can't ignore that, and what we say to our customers, if you like, is you know, only use especially a life safety product such as a fire protection product such as a fire curtain, is only use it if it's got valid third-party certification, and if you're using it for bigger than the furnace, let's make sure it's got that XAP, because otherwise it is, you might say it's an educated guess, but for a life safety product, it's unnecessary risk, basically.
Absolutely, and draw upon the expertise of the experts.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, nobody knows more about your fire curtains than you and the people in your business do. You know, there's an interesting tension though, isn't there? And it's the same for off-site manufacturing, where to do the right thing, to get the full design, to get the full specification, to support, for example, the Gateway 2 process, means that we need to bring our supply chain partners on board earlier. And I think that the challenge that I hope the industry will rise to is taking a more modern view to try and get away from this idea of 3 quotes represents best value, because you know, you will need to, project teams will need to partner earlier with manufacturers and commit earlier to be able to flesh out the design.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, so actually doing a kind of, you know, whichever way you choose to do it, but doing a strategic framework for products and then deploying that lots and lots of times, and not having on each project to go back to competitive tension, which drives the wrong behaviours,
Yes.
is going to be an interesting challenge for the market.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah, construction is unique in many ways, isn't it, as an industry? I mean, I didn't start in construction as an 18, 19-year-old, and college or what have you. You go into business, and the more you I don't know if it's wrong, but you bend over backwards your custom, you get it back and get it back and get it back. Whereas construction can be a little bit cold sometimes in terms of you can bend over backwards and it'll still be well, this quote's cheaper than you, and it doesn't reward that early engagement, really, does it? In that sense, we need a little bit of a tweak there, possibly.
Absolutely, and alongside the obvious, output that everyone wants of just keeping people safe.
Yeah,
I really do hope Building Safety Act and all the new legislation just changes the behaviours and actually helps us to create an industry that we should be proud of.
Exactly. Yeah, and remove a lot of because a lot of this, mentioned talking about cost and what have you, that can create a lot of there can be quite lengthy conversations about something that's not actually going to contribute to the safety or the benefit or the value that the client's getting out of the building, is it?
Absolutely not. I do think we just worry about the granularity of cost too much at some point in time.
So good, yeah. We'll just coming on to the topic, the headline, if you like, of the podcast. So product standards or product design or both. You're not allowed to get it wrong, Tim.
Both. It's definitely both.
That's very good, very good. Yeah, well, I'll just give a little bit of you can fill in the gaps, Tim, or do the main talk on this. But product standards don't deal with design per se. So when we're talking about British standards and European standards for products, they don't deal with design. So they are concerned with a product passing a laboratory test and then being safe to go onto market. So we've got a whole range of products, and they're all say, for example, they've all got a fire test to them.
Yeah.
Do you then just go to price?
I think you're going to go to a number of things. You're going to go to, okay, if you take from a kind of statutory perspective, they all perform the same.
Yeah.
But then you've got your kind of non-statutory perspective. So are they responsibly sourced? What's their carbon investment?
Brilliant.
What's the maintenance? What's the OPEX cost? Because the
Brilliant.
reality of it is the OPEX is going to more than obviate out the CapEx in the course of time. How easy are they to be maintained?
Yeah.
How long is the product going to be manufactured for? So if you need replacement parts, can you get replacement parts that are going to fit with it as well? So there's a whole backstory to it. Support, training, everything else as well. So
that's excellent. I think you really you've probably spoken from Mace's sort of the heart there a little bit with your as soon as I pushed you on. You've got the standards. What's the next deciding criteria? And I said, is it just cost?
Yeah.
Which might be the natural thing to go to. They all tick boxes. They all tick the same boxes. Do we just know it's cost? But you've straight away jumped into carbon there. Is that quite a big thing?
Yeah. It's huge for us. So virtually every job that we do now has probably got three characteristics to it. It's got embodied carbon, operational carbon, and more we're seeing the whole circularity come in. So how much of the content is recycled content? How much can be recycled at the end of it? Yeah. That's at small component levels. We're doing lots and lots of projects where we might take the cladding off, repurpose the cladding, put it back again to save, or repurpose steel from one project to another project to save it. But
have you done some big projects like that? Have you?
Yeah, we have. I can't remember specific names off the top of my head, but we've got ones where we are repurposing cladding, steelwork, facades, or we might take existing demolition crush and use it in slabs.
Yeah.
The more that we can stop from having to go away from the site, the better.
And the more that doesn't have to go through a whole new process again.
Exactly, because it is so carbon intensive
the process.
to create virgin materials.
Yeah. So what were those three elements again of the carbon? There's embodied.
So you've got embodied carbon.
Yeah. And what is that?
So embodied carbon is basically how much carbon is locked up in the manufacturing process for that particular component, both in terms of the material itself and the energy that was used to create that material. So if it was smelting the iron or carbon or pouring the concrete or what have you. Also including emissions that get you from the factory floor to the site gain, basically.
Yeah, okay.
Then you got operational carbon,
So
which
that's
is
the next stage.
which is like when the building's up and running, how much carbon is that building going to generate as a result of its running costs?
Is there a where does the actual construction phase fit into that? So you got embodied and then operational.
So we measure that as well. So for example, all of our energy costs, that's a kind of parallel to it, but
is that in the embodied umbrella or is it in between the two really?
It's probably in between. It's in between the two really.
Yeah.
So then operational costs. So then if you imagine the building's that amount of time.
Yes. Yeah.
The operational period is that amount of time. It's absolutely huge. Yeah. So, and again, that's the value curve that we need to go on. So if we can spend a bit more money, for example, on the fabric of the building, the operational carbon savings are immense, and also as well means that we won't need to go and retrofit in future years for it as well. Yeah. So. And then the third one was obviously circular. So the amount of material that can be reused or has been reused.
Yeah. Very good.
In the actual building itself.
Very good. And is that do you weight that as a decision maker, or is it just something you're encouraging?
Well, it's certainly something we encourage across all of our projects, and we're finding it more and more, especially circularity. I mean, embodied and operational carbon have kind of found themselves becoming more to the forefront of clients' requirements probably over the last decade. Yeah. And we're now really seeing circularity coming in as a third kind of leg of the stool.
Okay.
Over the last couple of years.
Sort of 25 or 50, whatever years it is, what do we do with this at the end of it, you mean? Is that the consideration?
Well, that's the kind of end of life. So we look at that as well. Yeah, we absolutely look at where we can design for deconstruction and reuse as well. So it's kind of having a more rounded view of the environmental impact.
So a lot of progress from sort of just putting the building up, isn't it?
Absolutely.
A much bigger story.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's all of these things are things that we should be doing.
Yeah, that's good. And then the second thing you talked about was the operational cost. I remember seeing a presentation to do with Digital Built Britain. Yeah. And something to do with the government spending something like, for every 99 billion or 100 billion it was spending on CapEx, it was spending 700 or 800 billion on the OPEX, is it called? Which is that's quite an eye opener. Yeah. But do you feel that's considered? Do you think consideration is given to that enough?
I think it varies. It does depend on the kind of sector and the client. Often, unfortunately, you'll see. We saw this a lot in schools, where unfortunately, you'll have one budget holder for the capital purchase of the building. And you might have another. Sometimes, often the same department in government, but just different pots of money that looks at OPEX. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't speak to each other.
Or they're trying to hit, CapEx are trying to hit their targets.
Exactly.
And it's not their problem exactly.
And it's whereas really if we could take what they call it, a TOTEX, the overall expenditure, if we could take that, it's going to drive better decisions. But again, that goes back to funding models, it goes back to everything else as well.
No, it's really good. So we've got so far we've got a product, ticks all the boxes, it's got the standards in place, and our first consideration so far is the carbon aspect. So embodied carbon, operational carbon, and then what was the last one? Circularity of it. That's great. And then the next point you put in about the consideration is the maintainability of it, the accessibility part. Say a bit more about that and how that would influence you as a contractor who isn't necessarily responsible for that. You might say post completion. How much do you really see the contractor, being genuinely concerned, or taking is that down to the client and whether repeatability of business and relationship, or?
Well, I suppose we're informed that although we've recently decoupled, we have a partner company called Macro who do facilities management, so we get to see that side of it firsthand, or at least
very good,
close to firsthand. And ultimately, it's like anything, isn't it? If you moved into your new home and God forbid a light switch broke, or and you need to replace it, if you can't find the right product or something, or it has a routine, it has an expected lifespan, you need to do it. All of these things are important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's breaking every 6 months.
And one of the problems at Grenfell was that the building had not been maintained as well. So even when the fire was there were other secondary elements that had not been maintained or looked after that contributed to the tragedy.
Would you see the client as quite important in that, in terms of how they put together their requirements for yourselves as the contractor. Is that Mace for yourselves as a contractor?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you see, I've done a lot of work in the past life with housing associations, and they're very specific about the products that they want, because they're portfolio managers
as well.
They're not just looking after one building, but they don't want to have to take a bucket of kitchen units to one, and then a completely different manufacturer's kitchen units to another one. So it's
spares and repairs.
It's spares and repairs.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, no, that's good. And then was there I think, did that really cover it then? So you'd look at, and then I suppose after that you're looking at value, I suppose, is probably your third.
Yeah, you would look at value, but I always kind of, I think you should look at value first, but you should look at cost effectively last.
Yeah.
If you make a cost-driven decision, it's going to drive the wrong behaviours. It's like anything. If you go to make a purchase, yes, you will have a price point in your mind, and we will naturally have that.
You do, yes.
But I guarantee you, if you were going to go and buy, for example, a TV, the first thing you'll probably look at is features and benefits.
Yeah, exactly. Yes,
and then make that value judgment against the price that they're asking for it. Whereas we tend to do it the other way around. And go, well, I can afford that. What features and benefits?
What's available for that?
What's available?
Exactly. Rather than that's interesting. That's really good. So, just on the topic, it's been very helpful, Tim, just to look at when we've got looking at a product and we've got the standards and they're absolutely essential, and then we really need to look at the product design in terms of the carbon. Interesting, Mace, are you at the forefront, would you say, leading the way, or is there a number of you all really pushing it?
I think I'd like to think we're towards the forefront. I wouldn't be arrogant enough to say that we're the number one, but it's massively on our radar. We're committed to it. Investing a lot of time and effort and money to get some of the tools shaped up as well. And in a way, if we can standardise components and we can digitally integrate our systems, I'd like to get to a point where as we make a decision between product A and product B, we can not just assess the cost, but we can assess the carbon in real time and the program implications in real time. So then that enables the team to make a more informed judgment about which ones to go for.
It's almost like another currency, another form of currency, isn't it? Carbon. So it's that's been very helpful. So we're choosing products on more than just the fact that they're passing the table stakes. We're looking at that value that they bring to the client and to the environment, really, from a carbon perspective, and then a whole life maintenance and maintainability perspective, and then even an end of life carbon. And there's probably a lot of developments to be done around that, I would imagine, and there's probably a lot of measures to be developed and put into place and then filtered down through the supply chains, and then to reward the right behaviours and the right use of materials and for the supply chain to develop designs that are more.
I mean, I have to say, I see a lot of great stuff coming up from the supply chain as well. So it doesn't feel like a pull dynamic. It's more of a push dynamic.
Very good.
And it's like anything. The most progressive product manufacturers will rise to the top.
Absolutely, Well, we as a manufacturer ourselves, we look at it and go, well, what does our client want? What's value? At the end of the day, we're trying to bring value to the table for yourselves as a customer, as a consumer of our product. So, we're a little bit led by that, but still being progressive and trying to be an early adopter and somebody that's making those moves.
And do you find upstream that the value judgments that your purchasers make are they consistent from business to business, or do you find it a quite fragmented landscape?
It's a very good question, and appreciate you asking it, really, because at the moment I think there's dare I say, I think there's more work to be done on putting a value on that and on the extra stuff that we all subscribe to. Ask anybody in the street and they say that we want to save the planet, we want to be use green friendly materials, we don't want to see the rivers full of plastics and the seas and all that. But then when it comes to actually paying for it, we don't see quite the same conviction and follow through, because people are building bills to budget. And they're like, well, I've got £30,000 for this package, or 100,000 or $1 million, whatever it is, and I can't go above that. And this guy is making the same. It's back to that. It's back to the subject of this podcast a little bit. Is they tick the boxes. And this is something I've heard in the last 7 days. It's and not just once. We do hear. It's like I'm the constructor, I'm the builder. I only really you need to speak to the architect about the design. I'm just needing to. So long as you give me that bit of paper, then I'm afraid if somebody else is
tick the box
a percentage cheaper, then I'll be going with them. So yeah, I think more does need to be done on that, just to reward the right behaviours, because at the end of the day we all subscribe to it. You know, if you took us away from that sort of like pressure situation where we're trying to, you know, achieve a budget and what have you, we'd all be. So maybe that's something that clients can influence more.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the things that we're trying to do at Mace as well is also elevate the role of the design manager. So nothing against my commercial colleagues, but to make sure that we're in the room.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if you just got one discipline in the room while those decisions are being made, we all gravitate towards the things that we feel comfortable with.
Exactly.
And it's far too easy to gravitate to just cost as the differentiator rather than anything else, without, you know, having the voices in the room to say, okay, we need to look at it from this perspective as well. So it's about our behaviours as well.
Of course it is, yeah. And we have an expression, I don't know whether it's an industry expression or just what in internal, we you know, say, are they just making a spreadsheet purchase, which is basically a series of boxes a tick and then what's the number at the bottom. But I think on that spreadsheet, what we need to do is get onto that spreadsheet is things like your carbon.
Yeah.
And have a number on it and put a number on it. So it can still be a spreadsheet purchase, because we almost need to reduce things to simplest. You know, we can actually make it a logical decision, but the logic needs to include considerations for carbon as a number, and also for your maintenance.
100%.
But who's going to bring that together, do you think?
Well, I think we're starting to do it. So again, if I go back to our C2P or MMC, each of our products has a data sheet basically with 7 different benefit metrics. So I won't do all 7, but you know, that encompasses carbon, it encompasses productivity, it encompasses health, safety and well-being, obviously cost as well, program benefits. So really what we're trying to do with that, and then each of those have got a methodology behind it and a score.
Yeah, brilliant.
And I always think, you know, like anything, if all of those are on what they call it, like a spider diagram, there will be a centre of gravity for each project.
Yeah, of course.
And if you can then align the products that have got a similar centre of gravity with that, you're probably going to be specifying the right products and systems and solutions that go into that.
That's excellent,
But yeah, and you know, hopefully I'd like to see us, you know, when we do what is currently a commercial lineup of, you know, quote 1, quote 2, quote 3, I'd like to see all of those parameters listed, because there's no point in having something a little bit cheaper, but the productivity on site is twice as long, because you'll burn it on your prelims anyway. So, you know, being able to be a scientist, that's what they say.
Yeah. The carbon one is probably the one that I think we subscribe to most as an industry, probably so far. I think the disparity between what we say and what we actually buy, or how much weight we put on the buying, is probably I wouldn't say it's the greatest, because I don't know every sort of area of construction, but I think it's there's a gap there at the moment, I think. Yeah. In terms of, you know, we're all trying to consider carbon, but where's that number in the purchasing decision, if you like?
And have your products all backed with environmental product declarations? Or are you on that journey?
We're on that journey, and you know, we look at things like, you know, it's almost, you know, there's some criticisms of, you know, planting trees and whatever. Is that called carbon sequestration?
Or offsetting,
etc. And credits and what have you. But with our product, it's relatively straightforward, because being steel, it's very recyclable. Even the electronic components and the control housing, that's all. Pretty much everything's recyclable apart from the actual main fabric. When I say main fabric, it's as a percentage of materials, it's not a big percentage, you know, maybe 10% or whatever it is. So it's quite a high percentage of recyclability, but we don't see it as a question often that we're asked. Which I think you know, we're just you know, don't want to make it too sort of, but we're just become a strategic partner of Mace this year, which is great. So we might see that changing with your own behaviours. But we'd encourage you know, contractors, and I think contractors will then probably maybe have to push it up the chain to compliance and say, look, you need to reward this in numbers for it to get onto that spreadsheet. You know, it needs to be a weighted consideration.
Absolutely.
So that's great. So any more on today's topic, Tim? Or?
I think we covered quite a lot.
Covered it. Yeah, that's very good. So you're very at home here, though, aren't you? In the studio.
This is lovely. I wish I had this at my house as well.
You just forgotten to bring your guitar.
I shall. Next time I'll bring the guitar.
I'm sorry I couldn't join
you. Join me a challenge. I'll do you a song about fire curtains.
Very good. So what's your favourite music or song? What do you like playing?
It's funny, isn't it? So I'm pretty eclectic in terms of musical taste. I'll go from anything from, I don't know, kind of country to indie.
Very
I'm an
good.
indie kid at heart.
Yeah,
you know,
okay,
you kind
very
of grew up with all that stuff.
Yeah,
But
excellent.
it's funny when you try and write a song, you always try and write it like the bands that you love, and
Yes,
it never
yeah.
turns out the same.
Do you write?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Any successes on that, or just for it's just a
I
hobby?
played festivals, played Latitude Festival and
Oh wow,
things like that.
very
Played
good,
London gigs and Camden and what
very
have you.
good. So, but not quite the day job.
No, if only, if maybe one day. Yeah,
Very
yeah,
good.
keep going.
So lead or acoustic or both?
They're both really
Bit of both.
good. Both.
Very
Yeah.
good.
I'm kind of. It's funny because you do presentations, and I'm quite happy to get up in front of 200
Yeah.
people or whatever.
Yeah.
Put a guitar in my hand, go on stage, and I'm the mean, moody guitarist at the background. I'll let the singers get on with that.
Yes, yeah.
So,
You just do the bit. It's
Yeah.
very, very, very needed. No, that's good. Well, thanks very much for your time today.
No,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
joining us.
Yeah.
And thank you all to the audience for listening. We hope you found that valuable, insightful. So next time you've got a question around product standards or product design or both, the answer is both. But don't let product standards alone, just ticking a box, complying with product standards, be the end of the conversation. You really need to consider design. From what Tim's gone over today is from a carbon perspective. So you've got the embodied carbon, you've got the operational carbon, and then the whole the recyclability of products. And then you, very, very importantly, we would say is the actual how often is that product going to need to be maintained, consider its application, and what's the experience going to be for the client at the end of it's going to be using the building on a day-to-day
Absolutely.
basis.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and we'll see you soon.